In this video, we'll explain why the villains in Andor are so different from the classic Star Wars baddies. We'll talk to some of the show's stars, who will explain why their characters are nothing like Darth Vader. So sit back, relax, and get ready for a unique perspective on villainy. First up, Andor stars explain why their villains are nothing like classic Star Wars baddies. As the Andor series enters its first season, the show's stars are speaking out about what makes the show's villains different from those seen in previous Star Wars projects. Andor's villains are what executive producer Jon Favreau calls a new breed of the bad guy. I think what's unique about the villains in our show is that unlike many Star Wars content, you have the Empire or the First Order. These are faceless monoliths. Our villains are much more personal. Andor star Diego Luna said, "They're people you get to know, understand, and sometimes even empathize with. I think that's what makes them scary," he added. "They're not just these two-dimensional bad guys, they're people you understand." And our co-star, Stellan Skarsgård, echoed Luna's sentiments, saying that the show's villains are more human than those seen in other Star Wars projects. "What I like about the villains in our show is that they're not just these abstract, faceless entities," Skarsgård said. "They're people with their motivations and agendas." Favreau echoed his star's sentiment, saying that the Andor villains are more relatable than those seen in other Star Wars projects. "I think what's unique about the villains in our show is that they're motivated by more relatable things," he said. "It's not just about power or control. It's about personal vendettas and betrayals." Andor is set to premiere on Disney Plus in 2022. Meanwhile, they say that the villains in Andor are more nuanced and complex than the typical black and white baddies of Star Wars. When it comes to the villains in Andor, they say that these evil forces are more complex than your typical black and white baddies in Star Wars. These villains have different layers, making them fascinating to watch on screen. While some may see them as evil, there's more to them than meets the eye. This level of complexity has made Andor one of the most popular Star Wars productions in recent years. Fans can't get enough of these morally gray characters, and it's easy to see why. There's something about them that's just so captivating. If you're looking for a good Star Wars story with some fascinating villains, then Andor is the way to go. Furthermore, these villains often have tragic backstory or are fighting for a cause they believe in. While the villains of Andor may not fit the typical Star Wars mold, they are still intriguing and complex characters. These villains often have tragic backstory or fight for a cause. This makes them much more relatable and sympathetic than your typical bad guy. While their actions may not always be defensible, it's easy to see where they're coming from, and that makes for a much more exciting story. So if you're looking for something different in your Star Wars villains, check out Andor. You might find yourself rooting for the bad guys. So this makes them more relatable and sympathetic, even if their actions are still evil. Since the release of the first Star Wars film in 1977, the franchise has become known for its iconic villains. From Darth Vader to Kylo Ren, these baddies are usually clear-cut examples of evil sworn to the dark side. However, the new Disney Plus series Andor is taking a different approach to its villains. The show, which focuses on the titular character from Rogue One, a Star Wars story, follows a rebel who isn't afraid to do the dirty work. Andor's antagonists, Dedra and Syril, also sit between the dark and light sides in the gray area. This makes them more relatable and sympathetic, even if their actions are still evil. Andor star Diego Luna explained in an interview with Collider that our show doesn't present things in a very black and white way, so I think that is what the original trilogy is. It's straightforward to understand that the Empire is evil and the rebellion is good. Andor doesn't do that. Serial actress Fiona Shaw echoed Luna's sentiments, adding that Andor is a much more complicated show than previous Star Wars projects. She continued, "It's about people struggling with morality and their place in the world. I think that's what makes it so interesting and different. With its morally complex villains, Andor is subverting the typical Star Wars formula and presenting a more nuanced take on good and evil. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out throughout the series." Finally, they are complex, layered characters that provide a challenge for the heroes to overcome. Andor stars explained that their villains are nothing like the classic Star Wars opposition. The villains of Andor are not the typical one-dimensional evil characters often seen in Star Wars. They are complex, layered characters that provide a challenge for the heroes to overcome. They are not simply evil for being wrong, they have motivations and beliefs that drive them to do what they do. This makes them much more exciting and compelling foes for the heroes to face off against. against. While they may not be as iconic as some classic Star Wars villains, they are still very dangerous and pose a severe threat to the heroes. The villains of Andor are much more nuanced and captivating than your typical Star Wars baddies. They have their motivations and beliefs that make them sympathetic, even if their actions are still evil. This makes for a much more exciting story and one that is worth checking out. So if you're looking for something different in your Star Wars villains, check out Andor. You might just find yourself rooting for the bad guys. Next, in other related news. Firstly, Andor's objective is non-fan approach. Andor has so far proved to be significantly more realistic than earlier Star Wars programs. This was done on purpose since Gilroy didn't want to imitate the classic Star Wars aesthetic. The showrunner, who also wrote the screenplay for the 2016 film Rogue One, has admitted in the past that not being a major Star Wars fan helped him create this particular show. Regarding Star Wars, Gilroy stated, "I wasn't in awe of it, so I knew I'd carry out my duties when I came here to mess around and fix Rogue One. I intended to bring my item here, and it succeeded. Everyone was ecstatic after we won and everything. So my impression-forming experience was something like, well, that's how you do it. And I carry out that. The best approach is that. Therefore, I didn't need to study it again for Andor." Andor, for which Gilroy is acknowledged as the creator, showcases his vision, yet he decided not to direct any of the episodes. Gilroy had been scheduled to direct the first 3 episodes. Still, he opted to forego that added responsibility in September 2020 to focus on his showrunning responsibilities. He also said he would not be directing any of the Season 2 episodes. He said, "I can't. This project is too big. I don't have any extra time. It's a terrible way to spend my time." Gilroy had wanted to direct some of the episodes of Andor. Still, he concluded that assigning different directors to each story arc would be best. "I just can't," he continued. "There was some fantasy that I would end up finishing the last block," he said. Andor Season 1 is barely halfway through its 12-episode run as of this publication. Gilroy, though, has previously said that Season 2 is completely planned. The second picture, set to begin production in November, will reportedly be based on 700 pages of original writing. The second season probably won't begin airing for at least another 2 years, according to the creator, who also said it would be a large-scale production. And lastly, Andor illustrates the Empire's casual racism against indigenous people. The Dani tribes of the northern lowlands of Aldhani are journeying to observe the revered atmospheric phenomena known as the Eye of Aldhani, near the walls of the Imperial garrison in Episode 6 of Andor, titled The Eye. They will be met by Commandant J-Hold Behaz, Stanley Townsend, and a group of senior Imperial officers, such as Colonel Pettigar. The latter does not see the event as a spiritual phenomenon, but as an Imperial viewing festival. J-Hold portrays the Dani people as simple and easy to manipulate in his conversation. He continues by outlining how the Empire's Machiavellian strategies for handling the Dani have been successful during their 12-year occupation of Aldhani. The group talks about how they treat the Dani while casually drinking from pricey goblets, showing that the Empire is an openly prejudiced organization and that the Dani people and their traditions are of little to no importance to them. It is instructive how J-Hold explains how they have consistently been able to reduce the number of Danis through strategic manipulation and relegation. The Empire views them as little more than a nuisance that primarily serves as a source of cheap labor and will eventually vanish from the planet. J-Hold brags that people are easily distracted and gullible, since they effectively lack the intelligence and agency to hold many thoughts simultaneously in their minds. In contrast to respecting their 10-day trip regarded as a sacred trek, he offered Imperial transport to get them to the garrison from the lowlands. This shows how little regard he has for their traditions. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. And don't forget to leave a comment below, letting us know your thoughts. We love hearing from you.